Hello world! I am once again working on my little railway, a 7¼ inch gauge railway, and I figured I'd take this time to film myself making a piece of track so that everyone on YouTube has seen me construct a solid piece of track. I know in the past I haven't always been able to properly film my doing of this, but that's because I'm not really good at filming real life stuff. To do this, I'm going to go ahead and use this treated lumber. It is not ground contact lumber, it is normal treated lumber, but it's surviving well enough in the outdoors and I'm not going to use it for anything else, so it might as well exist as a tie. I'll probably have to replace this lumber over time, but that's okay by me. I'm going to start this project by showing off to you that this T-post has a guaranteed little flat piece of metal on the back of it. If you line these two pieces up, all of your little ridges are going to line up perfectly because they're all the same distance apart. So go ahead and line them up. Don't bother knocking them off with a hammer. I thought about doing that, but it was a waste of time. As you can see on the backs of my ties, I've drilled a tiny moisture weep hole onto the backs of them, and onto the fronts of them, I've drilled a corresponding hole for that little ridge in the tie. So these should just sit right in there. The little weep hole does allow moisture in, but it also allows moisture out. So if moisture ever manages to actually get into the tie, that little weep hole will allow it out again. So it might be a home for bugs to live, or it might be a relief for moisture. Only time will tell. For this, I'm going to use a 5/8 bit. That seems to work the best for keeping the gauge. For a straight piece of track, you just make certain that you're using the same corresponding nub for each one of the ties. Obviously, if you go up or down a nub and the tie ends up diagonal, the tie will end up pulling the rails close together. And what I find is best is to just go ahead and shoot both ends of the track, and then that holds the tracks firm and steady while you can shoot the rest of the track. So I'm going to do that now. I've evolved the design a little bit for those of you who didn't watch my maintenance episode, and I've added 2 flimsy little washers onto the inside screw. So now the inside screw with these washers can really hold down the rail. The 2 outside screws do nothing. They are mostly just a secondary insurance that the rail will not pop out of its little seat inside of the track. You really don't need them, but I'm going ahead and putting them in there anyway. Of course, as you can see, with just those 2 screws on the inside and the little hole in the tie, these rails are already strong. You could make the entire railway this way, but I'm going to add the 2 outside screws anyway to just make certain it's extra sturdy. To address some of the comments made on some of my previous videos, I'm not really worried too much about splitting the wood because these are just very small diameter nails. I'm not using gigantic pounding railroad spikes. These are just small nails. So the odds of splitting these pieces are as good as splitting any of the pieces on your typical deck. After all, I'm using the exact same lumber you'd build your deck out of. So a split is not a big concern. I've worked out the math to maybe I'll get 1 split every 100 boards I manufacture, and that's perfectly reasonable. And if I ever want to replace a split, it won't be a big deal. It'll just be 1 little tie that I pull out. And I might not even pull it out all the way because of the holes that it engages with. And speaking of lumber, I went ahead and bought some ground contact lumber. This is the lumber I'll be using for all the rest of the ties for the rest of the entire railway track. All of the treated lumber is no longer going to be used. I used up what I have. and the only piece that's left is my little master gauge there. So it's all going to be manufactured here as ground contact, and all you got to do is pretty much cut the pieces. Man, this saw is really dull. I was thinking it when I was using it, but man, it is really dull. I had to switch to a newer saw because this saw has not been sharpened in quite a long time. Switching to my sharp one. Oh yeah. Now that'll go right through. Yeah. Unfortunately, as I saw, I shake the camera around a lot. I apologize for that. I'll skip the rest of the sawing in order to make it more bearable to watch this video. Now I can hear some of you already typing away in the comments section. Timber, why do you keep your master tie outside? We can see how old and ratty that thing is, and there are several reasons for it. One is the master tie is not all that important to me. It's just a tie in which I had to measure, and then I quickly pull the measurements off of it for all my other ties. But the next reason I keep it outside is for consistency. Wood shrinks, it warps, it grows, it alters its size over time. So if I do all the measurements on one master tie, and then I just take the measurements off of that tie that is stored in all the same conditions as the rest of my lumber, my original measurements stay exactly the same. Whereas if I keep the master tie in a dry, stable environment, I might pull it out, and the wood that I'm using it for measurements on is actually sopping wet. And that will cause certain sections of the track to squeeze together or expand differently than other sections, and to avoid that, I just keep the master tie outside. That way, everything has a tendency to swell up or contract in the same manner. Now, as for the question of whether or not wood swelling is actually a concern, especially on a little 7 1/4 inch gauge railway, that, let's face it, the gauging on this is going to be pretty rough anyway. I don't know. I just thought it was a good practice, so I implemented it without thinking. And maybe I'll get some benefits from it. Who knows? I was careful not to drill too far down with the big drill bit, and now I'm just plunging right on through with the little drill bit, and being careful not to hit my deck. I don't know if this little weep hole is a good idea or a bad idea, but I'm assuming it's a good idea. Moisture seems like something I should try to remove from the tie, and if I let in an ounce or two, I don't think that's a big deal. With the rest of my ties manufactured, it's just wash, rinse, and repeat the first step over and over until all of the ties are screwed into this one piece of track. I don't really have a strict amount of spacing in between ties, and I imagine if this were even more of a toy railway, if my locomotive were to be controller powered, and I wasn't planning on actually sitting on it, if it was just a strictly toy railway that was going to be a model, you could probably get away with only ties at the very end of each piece of track, with minimal derailment. But since I do plan on sitting on my locomotive, I'm probably going to want at least a foot of space in between each tie, and probably no more than that, just to make certain I'm not putting too much stress on the rails. The last step is a step I'm not always willing to show, and it's me trying to drill through this darn T-post. I don't work with metal very often because I have a very severe nickel allergy, so I always just stayed away from metal. This is, of course, iron and steel, so I'm perfectly fine. But I have no experience with drilling through metal, and of course, on my first try with this brand new drill bit that the guy at the hardware store assured me would drill through this no problem, I went ahead and snapped it. So there's now a piece of drill bit stuck inside of the rail. And I get it out of there, don't worry, but I'm pretty much just going to ram through Harbor Freight drill bits until I can figure out some kind of jig that simulates a drill press and makes this whole thing a lot easier. I don't really know what I'm going to do to make drilling through this T-post easier. I just have no idea where to even start. If you have any ideas, I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. I guess for now, I'll just skip filming this particular step because I'm just making a fool of myself trying to figure it out, and it's not really helpful information. I know that the fish plates are important, and I've thought of perhaps switching to wooden fish plates that engage with the little nubs underneath the track. I wasn't certain if that would be the right move to go for, though, so tell me what you think in the comments below. Should I be skipping these fish plates, using these fish plates? Should I go for some kind of under the track holder, maybe a modified version of a tie? Or should I just figure out some kind of drill press? If you know anything about drilling through T-post, or if you see a video in which someone does drill through T-post, and you can show me what I'm doing wrong, I'd love to see it. Alrighty, and that is a section of 8-foot, 7¼ inch gauge track completely assembled. And I guess I can just end the video now because I have a lot more of these to assemble over the course of several days. And once I get them stockpiled a bit, I'll show me putting them down. And I guess for now, I'll be saying bye-bye.